The following podcast is taken from a live broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and welcome to Friday Night Live with me, Hafiz Sha'ban, in this Friday early or late afternoon, early evening on the 27th of September 2019, corresponding also to the 27th of Muharram, I believe, 1441. As usual, we are broadcasting live to Luton on 105.1 FM and nationally and internationally. Nationally via our sister stations, Sheffield Link FM, Peterborough Salam, Derby, Nottingham, and of course nationally via the Inspire FM app. And also Facebook live stream via the Inspire FM app, so you can actually tune in, watch us live broadcasting from here, from the studios in Inspire FM in Luton, or listen to us, tune in to us, to listen to us across the world, wherever you may be now. Tune in, and most importantly, join today's discussion, join today's debate, get your voices heard, your points of view across, as always, to our panelists, our listenership up and down the country. Your thoughts and opinions do count. To get in touch, the number in the studio is 01582 01582 481822 is the number here in the studio. For those of you that love your SMS and your WhatsApp messages, it is 07779 481822 is the number for your SMS and for your WhatsApp messages, right? So a reminder just again, this is Friday Night Live and I am your host Hafiz Sha'ban, back after an absence of a number of weeks, but alhamdulillah, glad to be back in the hot seat. We're going to be covering a number of stories today. We're going to be starting off by discussing the earthquake in Pakistan. We're going to be asking, have you been affected? Do you have family in Mirpur? Were you there during the earthquake, during the tremors? Are you currently in Pakistan, or have you just returned from Pakistan? Then do get in touch with us. We want to hear from you. We are going to be speaking to brother Usman Zahid, who is the BBC Pakistan producer, and getting his updates and thoughts on the Pakistan earthquake and the aftermath. We're also going to be covering a number of other stories. Pakistan, Turkey, Malaysia announced a jointly launch of an Anti-Islamophobia TV channel. Now, what's going on there? We're going to be discussing that. Imran Khan's been busy, of course. He's been in New York meeting with Trump. He's met with Boris Johnson, met with a number of other leading dignitaries, been attending a number of different platforms, think tanks, and discussing and commenting on a number of different areas. We're going to be discussing that. And of course, the show wouldn't be complete without discussing Brexit. So we are going to be discussing what's the latest in the Brexit fiasco. Suspending Parliament was declared unlawful. Judges rule. Parliament is now reconvened. We're going to be discussing that. And last and finally, we're going to be discussing a new podcast service which has been launched by someone very local to Luton. So that's the lineup for today. I am Hafiz Sha'ban and this is Friday Night Live. Right, let's move on to our first story. We've got Usman Zahid, who is the BBC Pakistan producer, and it's great to have Usman Zahid on the line from Pakistan, and we've had Usman a number of times. So firstly and foremost, let me welcome Usman Zahid. Usman Zahid, assalamu alaikum, and jazakallah for joining us on Friday Night Live this evening. Great.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, fantastic. Always great to speak to you. And of course, I was earlier introducing the lead story this evening, which is the Pakistan earthquake. And of course, just a quick reminder for our listeners: Pakistan is, of course, on one of the most seismically active countries in the world, right? Being crossed by several major faults, and this, of course, is one of many earthquakes that Pakistan has had over the last couple of years, right? 5.8, so not as powerful as some of the previous earthquakes in Pakistan, but nevertheless quite a lot of damage. What is the latest update, Usman, on the earthquake in Pakistan?
Yes, it's sad. Yes, you mentioned that it's on fault line, and but it's you can say after the 2005 earthquake. This is the major one, because this for 14 years there was nothing of this scale. So this time is a 5.8, and it was not very deep. It was just 10 kilometers down, and 5.8 magnitude, and it caused comparatively big damage. In especially the epicenter was just near the Mirpur.
Yes.
So the latest is, I think, this. According to this local authorities in Kashmir and National Disaster Management, what they officially released figure is, I think it's nearly 40, some say 37 or 38. That was death, and lot more injured. Over 600 are injured. And another thing is, yesterday around 12 Pakistan time, 12 p.m., there was an aftershock in which again there was some damages. Some houses were damaged and caused more injuries, and over 60 people injured in yesterday's aftershock. So it's quite a big number are basically their houses are damaged or suffering because government is trying to provide them relief, and rescue efforts are going on. But it's so far there are a lot of areas which are not, you can say, not getting aid or not getting proper help.
Yeah.
So at the moment people are looking for aid, and now I've noticed some NGOs and some foreign-based people who are basically doing welfare work are getting involved and trying to help out all those people.
Yeah, okay. Fantastic, Usman. Thanks for that. And of course, I mean, you mentioned Mirpur being the epicenter, right? And I mean, I was in Mirpur last week. I only got back last weekend from Pakistan itself, so I just missed the earthquake itself. But everyone's been seen and circulating the social media. We've seen the cracks on the main roads. I've got statements to say the electricity supply to Mirpur and Kotli districts. Now, a lot of people in this town that we're broadcasting from in Luton, just for your information, Usman, are actually from these districts, the Kotli districts, right? So a lot of people have probably got a very direct experience, or someone, a relative out there who's probably been impacted or by the earthquake, right? So we've seen a lot of those pictures, and as we were saying earlier, that we have had a number of earthquakes in Pakistan. Now, I'm interested in terms of, where are we as a nation, Pakistan, in terms of responding to such natural disasters? I mean, any of these natural disasters are, of course, very unfortunate, and there are a loss of lives, and there are loss of infrastructure, personal property, etc., etc. But we are sitting on a fault line. What is Pakistan doing to address this inevitable kind of a natural calamity that it will be facing on an ongoing basis? Is Pakistan taking proactive steps to address this issue? Is there any evidence to suggest that, Usman?
Well, the authorities are basically, they are saying they are trying to reach out to all those people who are in need, and they are providing them like immediate kind of help, whatever the possible. But this. Whenever this sort of natural disaster, so things are not very speedy. Basically, it has to be done in phases. Yeah. So at the moment, they are mainly doing this rescue, and that the relief and rehab phases, that comes later. Right. So at the moment, they are trying to basically people who are injured, who are lost houses, and who needs food and medical kind of help. Yeah. So they are reaching that, and army got involved, and the army soldiers we have seen they are reaching to those areas. Army chief visited all the affected areas and assessed the damage, and then they moved the basically supplies, etc. So even this National Disaster Management, they announced like 500,000 rupees compensation for any family member dead. So per head, that sort of they are giving financial help, announced financial help. Right. So this is not gonna complete in like a week or so, but it will take maybe months or maybe a year to people to, bring back to normalcy.
Yeah. I mean, just out of interest, Usman, are you actually based in one of the cities? Have you been able to travel in to this area, which has been, the Mirpur or Azad Kashmir area, and see that for first hand?
My colleague, it's actually my fellow reporters. Basically, they've been to this area. I didn't go, but I live actually not very far from Jhelum, so. I mean, I have people who I've been constantly in touch with the people local who have seen the especially I've been in touch with people in Jatala, the most affected village in this area.
Right.
So we can understand this is all the houses which were damaged are basically, it's a scattered villages. They're not like a main city center, but they are in scattered in upper Jhelum area and all these that's most affected areas. And this normally in villages they have not like a very earthquake proof houses, and structures are not very kind of properly built. So that's another reason. That's why there are a lot more damages. And of course there's they were very close to the epicenter. That's why they suffered more damages.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm speaking of my visit to Pakistan last week. I mean, I was driving past Jhelum, so I think next time I'm in Pakistan, I should make an effort to actually meet you, perhaps Usman Zaid next time, inshallah. That would be an honor to actually meet you in person. But I mean, that's a side note. But I mean, I was happy to read. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people would have been very relieved to read the fact that the dam itself the Mangla Dam wasn't impacted by the earthquake. Thank God. Otherwise, of course, they could have had a lot more of a profound impact on the whole area, and in terms of the numbers that we are discussing, right? But okay, that's great. So in terms of infrastructure, you're saying the Pakistan, of course, the National Disaster Committee, kind of they're responding. The army is also involved physically. So you're expecting, a fairly considerable response from the you can say organization, Pakistani, emergency organization. What about the help and the input and the contribution from the NGOs and from the overseas committees and communities? I mean, for example, today in my local masjid here in the UK, they made an announcement for contributions to be raised next week, for the earthquake victims and for similar. Are you seeing a lot of support coming from the expat community?
Well, it's. I think people are doing it on some on individual basis, but we have heard there are few NGOs basically from UK based NGOs. They started some campaign, and also, I mean, they had this press conference today in this, and where they basically gave their details and asked their partners to, I think like Muslim Hand and some other NGOs got involved, and they are going and getting in touch with the people and with authorities especially to assess what exactly they should bring and how much sources they would need and all that. So it's again, I would say it's very early. It will take time, and it's so far response is you can say it's from government is quite good, because the army is involved and civil authorities are also involved. But NGO, they are still assessing, they are checking what exactly they can do about it. And I think in a few days we will see more effort and more kind of help reaching in these areas.
Yeah, I mean it's a bit strange, but also interesting. Of course, is Qadar. But I mean, last couple of days, I mean, I heard about an earthquake report today from Indonesia, from Turkey, and as you said, aftershocks are continuing. So it looks like that region. I mean, Indonesia is obviously quite far from that region, at least a good few hours away, but it seems to be quite prone at the moment, quite active at the moment, in terms of earthquakes. But is there still a lot of media coverage, covering the earthquake nationally within Pakistan? Because over here, I haven't seen much media coverage, really covering, the earthquake in Pakistan, perhaps because of the fact that, alhamdulillah, the casualties have been quite low at this time around.
Mm. Actually, the first day, I mean, they realized that it was maybe not bigger, but I think on second day, almost all Pakistani TVs went, and a lot of international media was also there. BBC was there, and so basically spoke to and tried to tell the world like how much is the damage and how big it was. So at the moment, I think another reason basically today it was more focus was Imran Khan visiting his speech in the United Nations, and that's why it was a bit off the radar. Otherwise, I think media is there and they are trying to reach to every possible area to highlight the problem and the damage done by this disaster.
Yeah, I mean, some of my personal thoughts. I mean, I've just spent 2 weeks in Pakistan and I've just come back. Is when I saw the picture of the roads that have almost literally been ripped apart by the earthquake. I mean, some of these roads. I mean, Mangla Road as a classic example. Comes off GT Road and goes towards Mirpur, right? I mean, even without the earthquake, that road absolutely is in diabolical state, right? It's dilapidated and needs completely redoing. So I mean, is the government really taking this building of the infrastructure, supporting that infrastructure really seriously? And a lot of the questions would be okay, post earthquake support, right? I mean, I'm reading here reports of the whole let me just bring it up to you. In the village of Shahankirikiri, right on the outskirts of Mirpur, residents said almost all the 400 houses were completely almost destroyed, if not damaged, right? And the roads that we've definitely seen in terms of infrastructure, quite substantial damage. Question is the government really going to give it the seriousness and the funds that it requires to rebuild those roads, especially when you see existing roads just being left there for many years without being fixed?
As I said, at the moment the whole focus is on this rescue efforts and try to reach maximum affected areas. And basically those media highlighted a lot of areas, but again I think they're doing trying to reach all the places which were damaged. So I think building roads will be maybe come, that will be rehabilitation phase will come maybe a bit late. So it has to be done I mean this time actually there's a couple of rains also after the earthquake. Yeah. So they are trying to send over the maximum tents and the food supplies and they're setting up the medical camps, etc. So that sort of things is going on at the moment, but building infrastructure will be maybe a bit late. And I mean, those things will be slow, but I think there's a big community living there, and this road connects to the lot of villages, and it goes to further towards I think Khari Sharif and all these areas. Right. So it's quite busy road, and it goes across this upper Jhelum canal. Yes. So it's they have to build it otherwise, because to connect the rest of the area towards main GT road. Yeah. So I think that will come sometime later. At the moment, the whole focus is on this rescue and relief.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of that, I mean, a lot of expats will be listening to us nationally, internationally on this show. Usman Saab, based upon what you're seeing and what you're hearing, what are the kind of a lot of people will probably want to help. Of course, like I said, a lot of people are, linked to those particular areas of Azad Kashmir. What is the best way of helping them? What are the immediate needs? Or is it really directing the people towards those NGOs that are involved on the ground to say, all right, help, support those NGOs in whatever they are actually, targeting, and that's the best way for the expat community to help the earthquake victims. What would you advise?
I think the situation this time is very different as if we compare it with the situation in back in 2005, because now everyone is connected, and through social media and through mobile networks, and everyone got this mobile phone facility. So I think all the affected people, someone local, if they are taking an initiative, setting up some sort of help center or some, centralized effort into their own local villages, I think reaching them would be the best option, because, if someone wants to help, if they reach to the area and directly, try to help them directly, I think that will be better. Otherwise, if they will channelize these things, and it will take time, and again, you never know that things reach to actual victim or not.
Right.
So this time communications are much better, and people are using social media, and a lot of people they are highlighting this overall disaster through their mainstream media as well. So people can easily identify the areas like where exactly the most damages are, happening, and where people need food supplies, etc.
Okay.
So I think this time through media, it will be easy to assess what exactly needed and how much they can help.
Right. So I've just got a couple of more minutes left, Usman Sahib. I've got one or two questions for you remaining. If you just give me a moment, I just want to reach out to my listeners just to remind them that this is Friday Night Live, and you are with me, Hafiz Sha'ban, on Friday Night Live on Inspire FM 105.1 FM. We are currently discussing the Pakistan earthquake with the BBC Pakistan producer Usman Zaid Sahib, direct from Pakistan. Have you been affected? Do you have family in Mirpur? Are you currently in Pakistan, or have you just returned from Pakistan? Then do get in touch with us. Let us know your thoughts. If you were out there in that region, you got a first-hand experience, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear from you in terms of what are some of the NGO efforts, relief efforts that are ongoing, whether you've been involved, whether you know of anything that's happening on the ground. 01582 481 822 is the number here in the studio to get in touch with me directly, to speak to me direct on air live, or 07779 481 822 07779 481 822 for your SMS and for your WhatsApp messages, inshallah. Right, I'm going to go back to Brother Usman Zaid Sahib. Usman Sahib, just slightly different question, right? With regards to the earthquake, but I'm going to probably look at the more preventative kind of measures. You referenced earlier, was it 2005 earthquake? I think you were referring to, which was quite a significant earthquake, if I remember correctly, right? What do I have it here? Yeah, 2005 was it? I think so, 2005. But also
it was 2005.
2005, correct.
2005.
Azad Kashmir Balakot, right? Almost. I've got figures here. 87,000 deaths, almost, right? And subsequent to that, I'm looking at earthquakes here in Pakistan. Quite almost 10 earthquakes since then. I've got a list of over here in front of me. That should surely indicate the fact that the government should be taking lessons learned from these previous experiences, putting in place some kind of preventative measures, educating the people a bit more with regards to what to do in the event of earthquake and tremors being felt. What evidence is there, or what have you seen to suggest that the government is learning its lessons, is putting past experiences in application, where we're taking preventative measures? Is there any evidence to suggest that from this experience in 2019, Usman Sahib, or is it hard to say that?
Well, government authorities basically, they have claimed that they are they can deal with this level of disaster, and basically they can reach out to areas, and they have enough sources available. They have in terms of technicalities, and this another thing is, which is it's not like a massive scale like in 2005, but 2005, but it is now basically in some area and one part. At that time it was areas were unreachable, that they were using only helis and stuff, and now they are like not very far from the federal capital, Islamabad, and everyone is reachable, and it's a disaster is not that big, one thing. And another thing is, yes, they have some lesson learned, and they are using the same sort of experience from the old earthquake.
Okay.
And in terms of, this NDMA was set up after this 2005 earthquake, and they have, experts, and even the, tents were available with them, and the basic supplies were available, and a team of doctors, etc. So
Okay.
they moved these things immediately, and trying to reach all those areas possible.
Okay. All right, fantastic. Brother Usman Zahid Saab, Pakistan PBC producer. We've run out of time. Thank you very much for joining us once again on Friday Night Live. Thank you very much. And hopefully, inshallah, next time I'm in Pakistan, I'll reach out to you and we can meet in person.
Sure. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you very much. Okay, listeners, that was Usman Zahid. Fantastic to have Usman Zahid Saab on the show, as always. And we were discussing the Pakistan earthquake. I really want to hear from my listeners. I'm sure a lot of you have got family out there in that Mirpur area, in Azad Kashmir, probably been impacted by the earthquake, inshallah, hopefully, without having fatalities. But if you've got any experience, do reach out to us. We'll be happy to hear your experiences and share those with our listeners. 01582 481 822 0779 481 822. We are going to go into a commercial break. When we're back, inshallah ta'ala, we're still going to be discussing Pakistan, but we're going to be discussing a slightly different story, inshallah ta'ala. Stay with me. I'm going to be back in a couple of minutes. Until then, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum, this is Atif Nawaz. Listen to Inspire FM shows in your time by heading over to inspirefm.org or listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to Friday Night Live with me, Hafiz Sha'ban. On this Friday evening, on the 27th of September 2019, we were discussing Pakistan earthquake earlier with Usman Zahid, BBC Pakistan producer. Great to have Usman Saab back on the air with us on Friday Night Live, giving his perspective and giving us the update on the Pakistan earthquake in Mirpur. As we know, last week the earthquake took place in Pakistan, in the Mirpur district, in the Mirpur area of Azad Kashmir. We also know of the social media messages that are going around, the infrastructure damage, the pictures of the near misses of people just missing the debris and the collapsing of the buildings. And we make dua for all of those who have passed away in this tragedy. To Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants them Jannat al-Firdaus and grants them the status of Shaheed. And we also ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect the others in Turkey, Indonesia and other places where similar earthquakes have been happening over the last couple of days. But if you have been to Pakistan, or you have any loved ones, or you have any personal experiences from this recent earthquake in Mirpur, then do get in touch with us. 01582 481 822 0779 481 822. We are going to be moving on to our next story this evening, and that is Pakistan, Turkey and Malaysia announced that they are to jointly launch an anti-Islamophobia TV channel. Now, when I first saw the Twitter by Imran Khan going around saying that there's going to take 3 nations to come together, right, to launch an anti-Islamophobia TV channel. Now, I have to tell you personally my personal thoughts, right, and then I want to hear from you, my listeners. I was a bit pessimistic, to be honest with you. I thought 3 nations it takes to come together to launch an anti-Islamophobia TV channel. That was my first thought. Then my second thought was, what are these nations individually doing to address the problem of Islamophobia, right? Is that the most that we can do? Launch a TV channel to address anti-Islamophobia, right? So it I was a bit skeptic, to be honest with you, but here it is. Malaysia, Pakistan and Turkey are working on the launch of an English language television channel to tackle Islamophobia. What do you think? Do we already not have enough channels? What are these channels doing? Are they actually servicing, providing a service, a quality service? And do we already not have the infrastructure and the media platforms to actually address this particular issue, right? Now, Under the joint venture, let me give you a bit more information. Under the joint venture by the three countries, series and films would be produced so that the Muslims and the world at large could be educated on Islamic history, right? So I've given you my view. Let's speak to some experts from the world of media and let's get their views, right? So we've got Yusuf Irim, who is who is, if I got it correct here, TRT World, analyst from TRT World, who's joining me live from Turkey, inshallah ta'ala. So I've got Brother Yusuf I'm going to be speaking to right now. Is Brother Yusuf alive? I believe he's live.
Hafiz, I'm here.
Yeah, hi, assalamu alaikum. Yusuf, jazakallah for joining us on Friday Night Live, right? So, as you would have heard my introduction, tell myself and tell our listeners more about the launch of this Anti-Islamophobia TV channel by Three Nations.
Well, first, I heard you were pessimistic. I was listening in, and I don't think there's reason to be pessimistic.
Seriously. All right, go on then.
Impacting popular culture is very important, and the best way to do that is through media, whether it be social media or whether it be TV. And we got to reach out to the youth because media is dominated by white Anglo-Saxon Christian channels, and the only way to reach out to the youth is through this medium, and it's very, very important to be able to communicate our history, our beliefs.
Right, so don't get me wrong. I'm all for media and for using the media platform to reach out to the youth. I mean, for example, right, I was going to come on to this. You know, the recent series or the last 3-4 years, or if not longer, Erdogan, right, has been phenomenal in terms of the impact that it's had and you know the influence that it's had. That's the kind of positive message and the history that has gone out to a lot of the youth, right?
Definitely.
But I tell you why
power is very important.
Absolutely, but the reason I'm pessimistic is, you know, it's taken us so long to realize that, and then it takes three nations to come together to try to produce something like that. That's my pessimism for you. But go on, Yusuf.
I don't think it takes three nations to come together. Yeah. Turkey could have done it by itself. Malaysia could have done it by itself. I think Pakistan could have done it by itself too. Yeah. Yeah. I think the reason why having three nations together is a symbol of unity. Yeah. I mean, Imran Khan and Mohammed Mahathir are very important Muslim leaders, along with Recep Tayyip Erdogan. And having them three together, stand together on a project like this, I think that's the important part. Because either one of these three countries could have done this TV channel. So I wouldn't get stuck on having three countries do it.
Okay.
But what could be done more? I think definitely movies, TV shows, getting these shows on platforms like whether it be Netflix, Amazon Prime, the Hulu. These are very important to reach out to kids at an impressionable age for them to understand what true Islam truly is. And you don't because if you don't reach out to these kids, you're going to have these far right groups reaching out to them. You're going to have them get bombarded daily by hate speech, whether it be at school, whether it be on the street walking around. I mean, I'm assuming you guys are doing your broadcast from England, and majority of your listeners have probably faced some type of Islamophobia, some type of racism, probably on a daily basis. So I'm sure they understand. Well, what I'm saying now, I'm lucky I get to live in a majority Muslim country where I don't have to worry about that. But, I mean, unfortunately, when you're living out in the West, this is something that you're faced with on a daily basis. I mean, they see a woman with a hijab and they walk the other way. They see someone with a long beard and they think terrorist. This type of stereotype, you can't change this in one day. So you have to target the youth. You have to educate. That's the way to do it. And the best way to do this is popular culture.
Yeah, okay, sure. All right, so I've got my other guest online too. So let me welcome Noor Uzkan, who's from the Daily Sabah Ankara Bureau Chief. Hopefully I've got the details right and the name pronounced correctly too. So Noor, welcome to Friday Night Live, broadcasting from Luton, from the UK. We are discussing Pakistan, Turkey, Malaysia jointly launching this Anti-Islamophobia TV channel, right? So Yusuf has presented a strong case for three nations coming together, you know, the symbolism of unity, of different nations coming together. I echoed some initial early pessimism, why it's taking three nations to do this and why so late in the day. What are your thoughts when you heard this news, Noor?
Yes, actually, as you have mentioned, Hafiz, the three countries which represent actually the most, like the majority of Muslim population on this earth. So this is one of the significant part of it. So Malaysia, Pakistan, and Turkey. So as by the numbers. So on the other hand, it's very inspirational. So those three countries also represent the all factors of Islam, and also very good examples of Islamic thought, of the historically, and also but also including other minorities in itself. For example, in Turkey, we have a Jewish community, we have a Christian community, and all others. Or other side of the Christianities, like Orthodox Church in Istanbul, for example. So and synagogues all over the place around Istanbul and all over to Turkey.
Yeah.
So in terms of those three countries, as well as Pakistan and Malaysia, let's say, representing all kind of Islamic thoughts, and also historic thoughts, and also the other minorities and ethnic backgrounds and religions.
Yeah.
So I think those three countries is the most appropriate and most suitable countries to just establishing and building up a good sentiment and discourse about Islam, and about the Muslim world complaints, about the hate speech against Islam, against Muslims all around the world.
Yeah.
So this is my point at first hand, actually.
Yeah. No, great. I know, I appreciate that. I mean, look, I will agree. I mean, Turkey's been is done fantastic with regards to, the Ertugrul documentary and the series, right? For the last couple of years, and I probably think that's probably before that, was it the NBC that produced the series on Umar ibn Khattab? Apart from those two, I can't really remember a third that has had as much of an impact on the global Muslim communities as those two particular series that were produced recently, right? But like I said, there's plenty of the channels out there, plenty of platforms that can be used, but unfortunately not used. I mean, we have the likes of Arab League, World Muslim Organization, the D8 group, and you have the Muslim so-called Army, IMAFT, and so on and so forth, and so many of these organizations. And what a lot of people find is that they are nothing but a talking shop, and really there's no action that is produced out of it. And when we're talking about anti-Islamophobia, right? Anti-Islamophobia, we're really talking about the non-Muslim community as opposed to the Muslim community, because there's no point preaching anti-Islamophobia to the Muslim community, right? So how would what is the proposal of actually reaching out to the non-Muslims via this channel? Have you actually looked into it further?
I'm assuming you're asking me.
Yes.
I haven't seen clear details on the project yet. I'm assuming it's at phase 1 right now, where a basic understanding has been reached on a brainstorm of opening this channel, and we'll probably get more details in the future.
Yeah.
But I don't think that the channel will just be based on combating Islamophobia. I think it'll also be an important platform to educate our youth living in Western countries that are constantly bombarded with assimilation, where they understand their religion better. Now, when you have Islamic children growing up in the West, they're open to be assimilated. They're open to be targeted. They're open to be targeted by or radicalized by groups. When you don't understand your religion, you have different groups trying to teach that to you. It's important that you are taught properly what Islam is, because of course every religion has its extremes, and the extreme is dangerous for any religion. So it's important that you have these countries getting together with these important, strong Islamic leaders who are role models for the Muslim world. All three of them are role models for the Muslim world, coming together, deciding what content is relevant and important for these young, impressionable minds to be able to hear. We should have our own heroes. We should have Muslim heroes that we can look up to growing up And I think that's very, very important at such an impressionable age, at a young age. And like I said, that 5 to 18-year-old group, very, very important that they need to be taught properly.
Okay, a last question. My producers are just telling me that we're running out of time, so I got to move on to the next topic. But last question for yourself, Noor. Do we have now a date for when Usman and the next series is going to be kicking off? Now that we've seen the back of Ertugrul, Noor, we're waiting. All of us are waiting news from Turkey on when this new series. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I'm sure you are. Usman is going to be kicking off. Is there a date for that at the moment?
Actually, I'm not well aware of.
Right.
Are we talking about the channel specifically, or other things?
No. This is the Ertugrul, resurrection, drama.
Oh, Osman. You mean, okay.
Yes.
This could be directly directly asked to the TRT people. I think Mr. Yusuf will be more aware about the serial soap opera more than me.
Okay.
But I think it'll be kicking off about next week or so, yes.
Next week. All right, Yusuf, so that question back to you. Do we have a date when, a lot of our listeners will be are big fans of Ertugrul and Osman?
I believe it's starting the second week of October, if I'm correct. I'm not 100% sure, but it was the second or third week of October, so we're less than a month away. But it looks like it's going to be another phenomenal TV show.
Absolutely.
So I'm greatly looking forward to it as well, and I know for a fact that there's many other works in the progress right now regarding Ottoman history.
Yes.
It's a very rich history, history that Turkey needs to capitalize on.
Yeah.
We're seeing other countries capitalize on their history by marketing it via Hollywood, and just a rich Islamic history that not just for Turkey, but for the whole Middle East and North Africa as well.
Absolutely.
A history that many other countries can relate to.
Absolutely.
From the golden age, I would say the golden age of Islam.
Absolutely. I mean, unfortunately, I've run out of time, but you've given me a fantastic idea. I think we're going to reach out to you for next week because I think let's do another show on actually looking at some of those series that are in the pipeline, and especially Usman that's been lined up for the next couple of weeks. Thank you very much, Yusuf and Noor, for your time this evening for Friday Night Live. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yusuf and Noor.
Thank you.
All right, listeners, that was we had Yusuf Irim from TRT World, and we had Noor Özkan from the Daily Sabah Ankara Bureau Chief, discussing Pakistan, Turkey and Malaysia to jointly launch an anti-Islamophobia TV channel, right? We're going to move on to the next story, and that also involves Imran Khan. And of course, Imran Khan's been very busy over the last couple of days. And indeed, there's been a lot of things happening in New York as, of course, it's been the UN General Assembly meeting going on in New York in the United Nations, and of course that's been followed by a back-to-back addressing of the United Nations by a lot of the different political leaders, and of course Imran Khan has been under the spotlight today. Also, he's been addressing the United Nations Assembly, and of course he's been having a number of conversations, number of meetings on the sidelines of the United Nations in New York with Trump, with Boris Johnson, and with a number of other Muslim leaders, in addition to a lot of the think tanks, right? To speak to me in further detail about Imran Khan in the United Nations in New York over the last couple of days, I want to introduce you to Brother Hassan Abdullah, who's the diplomatic correspondent at TRT World. Brother Hassan Abdullah, welcome to Friday Night Live.
Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Right, Brother Hassan, as I was just introducing the topic, so it's Trump meets Imran Khan, or Imran Khan meets Trump at the United Nations in New York. He's had a very busy schedule over the last couple of days. Have you been following the United Nations General Assembly over the last couple of days, and what do you make of it?
Well, yes, I have been. The Pakistani Prime Minister has obviously had a number of meetings on the sidelines with a number of world leaders. I think what really stands out today is his address at the United Nations General Assembly, in which he was, I would say, quite assertive. And, he really touched on four main issues, you could say. He talked about climate change, money laundering, India-Pakistan relations, and he talked about Kashmir. Now, I think what was very important is the fact that he contextualized it for an international audience. And the international audience we're talking about here is the international leadership. So, for example, on the issue of Kashmir, when he said that the sort of repression that's being witnessed in Kashmir, and traditionally it's been fashionable to blame Pakistan for it, but he talked about the circumstances and what's going to happen if this sort of curfew is lifted, how there could be a response, and how the international community needs to be worried about it. And obviously in the context of India-Pakistan relations, he touched on, for example, regional stability and so forth.
Sure.
So in that context, I think it's very important the way he talked about it.
So Hassan, let me come back to you. We've also got I've got another guest, Islamuddin Sajid, who's the regional chief correspondent of an Anadolu agency for Asia Pacific based in Islamabad. Hopefully I've got that name right, Islamuddin. You can correct me when you come on air. But Islamuddin, my question to you is, right, that we've seen Trump play this game. I mean, he's been on the stage with Narendra Modi where he blamed Pakistan. Then the next day Trump comes and he calls himself a friend of Pakistan. And we have political commentators saying that Trump is just being Trump. He's clearly saying to India and Pakistan individually what they would like to hear, right? Whilst keeping his focus on the US troops and his interest in Afghanistan, right? So isn't this just a game that's being played? And isn't this a platform where we've heard Benazir Bhutto in the past, we've heard Ahmadinejad in the past from Iran, we've had so many different leaders say whatever they like, but is it just not a mere talking shop? Is there more to it than what we hear, Islamuddin?
Yes, thank you very much. Basically, you know that currently the Pakistan position is very important for the United States because the U.S. Has busy in its 19-year-long war in Afghanistan. And recently you saw that Pakistan has played a very important role when the Taliban came on the table with the U.S. Top negotiator. So that is the reason that Trump knows the importance of Pakistan, but on the other side, India is also very important for the United States due to its very big market because it's a very huge population. So that is the reason that U.S. President never wanted he should just speak something against the Indian action in Kashmir, and he speak anything against the Indian Prime Minister. So that is, I think, the main reason that when he just meet with the Modi, he will definitely praise them. He will talk about India, that we have very good relation with India. But when he will come to the Pakistan, so definitely
I get that, Islamuddin, right, and Hassan, right. I get that. I get it's everyone has their own interests, but I mean, isn't that exactly then the point that we have been hearing the case of Palestine at the United Nations Assembly for decades, and nothing has happened, right? And we're hearing exactly the same thing. I get Imran Khan, and I'm all for building a public opinion, building international opinion for the against India for the oppression of Kashmir, right? But it's a talking shop, and we know no action will be taken because that's exactly what's happened for Palestine for the last 40, 50 years, Hassan. What do you say to that?
You are right, but here's the situation.
Islamuddin, let's hear from Hassan, and then we'll come back to you.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
Well, I think it's you have a valid point there. I mean, in terms of what the UN has achieved, there have been a number of questions raised about the performance of the UN since the post-Second World War. So that's a valid point you raised there. But then we also have to ask, what options do we have? For example, either you rely on hard power. So let's say there was a case that the military or some Muslim state decided to take action and just use force and muscle to try and free Kashmir. That would be like one option. But realistically, is that really viable? So when you say that something is not working, then you have to question as to what the other options are.
Yeah, but I mean, the same question, realistically, is it viable to go to the United Nations Assembly and speak to people who have no interest in your case, apart from their own interests? Realistically, what are we intending to achieve, Islamuddin?
I think the situation in South Asia is totally different, because here that on both sides they are the nuclear power. So, if, for example, if they will go to the any war, so definitely it will destroy the whole region. So that is the case that today Imran Khan has also explained in the United Nations General Assembly, and he warned the United Nations that the United Nations will not take any practical steps, and the both countries will go for the conventional war. So it will not remain to the conventional, because Pakistan is 7 times smaller than the India. So definitely they will go for the nuclear war. It will not only decide the two countries, but it will affect on the whole world. So that is the issue that I think the situation in South Asia, especially here in the subcontinent, it's totally different from the
Islamuddin,
and Khan has also
right. It looks like we've lost. Is it Islamuddin? I think we've lost Islamuddin. Right. So in fact, that wasn't Islamuddin. That was Hassan Abdullah that we've just lost. Islamuddin, are you still on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, okay. I've just lost my other guest, and all right, so I think we're having some technical issues. We were discussing Imran Khan at the United Nations General Assembly, what's been happening, some of the progress, some of the meetings, and we were discussing with two fantastic guests. Unfortunately, I've lost both of them, but I've lost them at a strategic time, because we're about to go into a commercial break anyway. So I would have had to wrap up, and it would have been a bit difficult to wrap up such a long conversation, and it just happens that we've lost them. All right, we're gonna try to reach out to those guests after the break. We are going into a commercial break. I'm gonna be back in a couple of minutes, inshallah ta'ala, when I'm gonna hopefully try to see if I can continue with a couple of more minutes to discuss that, because it was a very interesting discussion. Imran Khan, United Nations General Assembly, speaking to the world, speaking to America, addressing the issue of climate change, money laundering, Kashmir. Is that the right platform? And are we going to get any changes discussing those issues on that platform? I'm going to come back in a couple of minutes. I'm going to try to discuss those subject matters a bit more further. I want to hear from you. Until then, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
You're listening to an Inspire FM podcast, making available our popular programs from our daily broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Welcome back to Friday Night Live with me, Hafiz Sha'ban, on this Friday evening on the 27th of September 2019. As usual, broadcasting live to Luton on 105.1 FM and also via our sister stations nationally and internationally. Also via our Inspire FM app and of course Facebook live stream. We were discussing a number of topics in the first hour, and subhanAllah, it's already the second part of the show, the last hour of the show. For those of you that have just tuned in, missed the first hour of the show, hopefully you will be able to listen to the repeat. Also the podcast is available immediately after the show. But just to give you a quick recap, we were covering the Pakistan earthquake in the first half an hour, and we were discussing to a BBC correspondent in Pakistan, getting an update on the Pakistan earthquake situation. And then in the second part of the first hour, I was covering very pessimistically today. I mean, I've been told I've been a very pessimist and I've been very negative today, but that's the view I've had today on the Pakistan, Turkey, Malaysia to jointly launch Anti-Islamophobia TV channel, right? So I was questioning that, and then also I've been discussing Imran Khan. Imran Khan's been very busy. He is an orator, fantastic, spokesperson as an individual, very charismatic, addressing the United Nations Assembly, General Assembly. In fact, let me reach out to my listeners. 01582. Let not me give you my opinion. 01582 481 822. 0779 481822. And I know there's a lot of our listeners out there, PTI supporters, I'm sure Imran Khan supporters. What do you make of Imran Khan's address to the United Nations General Assembly? Now, he's been very active over the last couple of days, right? So it's been packed back to back last couple of days. The whole week has been very busy at the United Nations, at the General Assembly. He's been having sideline conversations with, Trump, with Boris Johnson, with Mohammed Mahathir, with Erdogan of Turkey. He's been, addressing a number of think tanks, the Asia think tank. He's been addressing the Council for Foreign Relations think tank, and a number of other think tanks that he's been addressing. So he's been doing a lot of PR, a lot of marketing. He's been addressing climate change rather. He's been addressing, money laundering. He's been addressing Kashmir. So he's been doing a lot. He's been addressing a lot. He's been discussing a lot. Now, we're trying to get back to, two of my guests that I was speaking to before I went into a commercial break, right? And that was Hassan Abdullah, diplomatic correspondent at TRT World. We're trying to get through to Islamuddin Sajid, who's the regional chief correspondent for one of the agencies for Asia Pacific based in Islamabad. Whilst we try to get through to both of my guests, right? And I was, of course, questioning, the United Nations, how many leaders we've had in the past that have gone to that United Nations institution, addressed the world at large, raised the plight of Palestine, raised the plight of Burma, we've raised the plight of Kashmir. What have we got in return? Now, that is the question that I'm putting out there to my listeners, and I want to hear from my listeners. What are your views? What are your thoughts? 01582 481 822. 07779 481 right? That is for your social media messages. If you have been following Imran Khan, if you've been following Geo News, if you've been following PTV, if you've been following any of those media outlets, let me hear your thoughts. Now, we've had one message coming, which is, all right, presenter, you're being too negative with regards to the United Nations. You're being too negative with regards to, you're too pessimistic with regards to your, this Anti-Islamophobia TV channel. I'm happy to hear that. I'm happy to hear someone to say that I'm being too negative, but you tell me the opposite. What have we achieved, via the United Nations Assembly? What has it been able to do with regards to Palestine? What has it been able to do with regards to Kashmir? We've been discussing Kashmir on that platform for so many decades, right? So many decades. And indeed, are we actually addressing the very people who have created the problems in the first place? I don't know. If you think I'm being too negative, then you need to call in and you need to tell me that I'm being too negative. If you think I'm being too cynical, then you need to call in and you need to tell me I'm being too cynical. But I'll tell you what some of the other media correspondents are saying right now, right? So let me give you a quote, if I can find it here, from Shekhar Gupta, right? Shekhar Gupta, who is a senior journalist and an editor, right? Now, this is his quote. He says, Trump, right? This is with regards to Trump. Trump is being Trump. He wants his trade deal from India, right? And he wants help from Pakistan in Afghanistan. Of course, he wants the Nobel Prize too. He doesn't care. He doesn't care for either country or leader, but there's a clear hierarchy in ties with regards to the two countries, and I think Modi will take it. So here's an independent view from a journalist, from an editor with regards to Trump. I mean, you can go to Trump and you can go with your case of Kashmir, but Trump is only interested in his own trade deal. He's only interested in getting help from Pakistan in Afghanistan, and that's what he's after. And for me, it's almost like we're speaking to to deaf ears here, people who are not really interested. But I get the argument also from the other side, which is Pakistan and Imran Khan is trying to build an international opinion with regards to the issue of Kashmir, and he's trying to get world sympathy with regards to the issue of Kashmir. But what will we achieve through trying to get world sympathy on the issue of Kashmir? For Palestine, we've been doing that for the last 40 years, and we have seen no action with regards to Palestine. And that's the kind of, that's the analogy that I'm drawing. But I'm gonna leave it to my listeners. I'm gonna leave it to my listeners to call in. Be brave enough, call in. Let me hear your thoughts. 01582 481822 0779 481822. I've tried to put both arguments onto the scale, and I'm going to let my listeners to come in and try to shape it in either direction further. All right. So unfortunately, it looks like we've been unsuccessful in trying to get back to Hassan Abdullah or to Islamuddin Sajid. It would have been fantastic to have them a bit further to discuss this issue, but we're going to move on to our next subject matter. And indeed, the next panelists and the next guest that I've got may want to share a thought or two in terms of what's been happening in the General Assembly in the United Nations, because he's a lecturer in UK politics, and it's Muhammad Jalal. So let me welcome Muhammad Jalal to Friday Night Live. Of course, he's no stranger to Friday Night Live. Of course, been here in the studio previously on discussing a number of different topics. But let me welcome Muhammad Jalal. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's great to be with you.
Jazakallah khair for your time, Muhammad Jalal, and joining us this evening, right? So we were, of course, we are scheduling to discuss the Supreme Court, and suspending Parliament was a lawful judgment. And we also had another guest, unfortunately, who hasn't been able to make it this evening, right? But earlier I was discussing with a number of guests with regards to the General Assembly and the United Nations, going on for the last couple of days. Imran Khan's been there. He's been discussing the case of climate change, anti-money laundering, and he's also been discussing, of course, the issue of Kashmir. I don't know if you care to and if you've been following the events in New York, Jalal, and whether you want to make any comments or your particular comments on what's been happening out there.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. I suppose what I would say is that Imran Khan is currently going through, he has a dilemma. His dilemma is he's got to keep his public aware of the situation of Kashmir, and he's got to, in some respects, pacify or deal with some of the sentiments that exist in Pakistan, which are calling for him to take action over Kashmir. But at the same time, he knows that he can't really take action over Kashmir. It's a very difficult thing for Pakistan to take solitary action without America's backing, or at least without the acknowledgement that America has enabled him to do something over Kashmir. And so the only option Imran Khan has is to talk about Kashmir and to raise it on international platforms, and to make it seem like to his public that he is taking decisive action, when in reality Modi has been permitted to in effect militarize the region even further and establish his domain over it. And within time, Modi will be able to claim Kashmir as his own sovereign body. So even the pretense of calling it a semi-independent region would no longer exist, right? He would incorporate it within Greater India. Yeah. And at the moment, Pakistan is probably allowing and enabling that to happen because it can't do very much more than talk about it. So I think that's probably my take on it as to how ineffective in some senses Pakistan is in dealing with this problem.
Right. So that's interesting. And what better platform to talk than the United Nations? Because I think that's what the United Nations platform is all about, just talking and not real action in terms of solving any of his crises. So I mean, he's taken the best platform available to him to really address the issue of Kashmir from a theoretical perspective, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. He needs to deal with the Kashmir issue by addressing it every day and having and continuing the commentary. Remember the way that Pakistan works is you've got 24-hour news coverage now across, many channels in Pakistan, and you need to feed that news agenda, right? Otherwise, the news anchors begin to question, the lack of progress over Kashmir. And so what is effectively tried to do is to try to dominate the news agenda by adding something to it on a daily basis, sometimes even on a half-daily basis, right? And so, when he's during his time and stay in New York, because of course he's been there for a number of days. He has had to continue to feed that news agenda, and of course his speech today is a continuation of that. And unfortunately, there is probably not a will in Pakistan, and probably, there is a lack of ability in Pakistan to decisively deal with the problem of Kashmir. And so when a leader can't deal with it, they then take this secondary option to talk about it. And yeah.
All right, I appreciate that. All right, listeners, 01582 481822, 01582 481822. We are discussing the topic of Kashmir. We've been discussing the topic of Imran Khan at the United Nations General Assembly. He's obviously made the issue of Kashmir quite prominent, and that was expected. Modi's also been there. There have been a number of conversations on the sidelines with Trump. Trump's mentioned, referenced Kashmir, media on the issue of Kashmir between India and Pakistan. Of course, he expects Pakistan in return to support America with regards to stabilizing Afghanistan and trying to reach a peace deal in Afghanistan. So, of course, a lot of interest for Trump himself. But we're going to move off that subject matter. I'm going to leave it an open subject matter for our listeners. On the other hand, if they want to comment and send in their views, their thoughts with regards to Imran Khan at the United Nations over the last couple of days, with regards to his speech, any particular view, do please feed that into me on 07779 481822, and I will take your social media messages and read them out to our listeners. But we're going to move on to the next topic, and that's the topic that we have invited Muhammad Jalal onto Friday Night Live this evening to discuss, and that's what's been and that's with regards to what's been happening in the Houses of Parliament. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to be absolutely confused out of their heads. What on earth is going on with regards to Brexit? And I know we've been discussing it on Friday Night Live. I know Brother Zafar's been discussing it on a number of shows over the last couple of weeks and months. And the whole nation's been discussing Brexit over the last couple of months or the last couple of years. And I'm sure a lot of the nation and a lot of the community are probably sick and tired of hearing Brexit, and all of this confusion around Brexit. So we're hoping, Jalal, you're gonna clarify, what's been going on here, because there's been a rather embarrassing U-turn that the Boris Johnson government has had to make with regards to suspending of Parliament. Why don't you give us a layman's, version of what's been going on for our average listener, and just give them a bit of a guideline in terms of what's been going on and where we are at the moment, Jalal.
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. I think you're probably right when you said that it's a fairly confusing time, right? And on a daily basis, we're now used to the drama that's called Brexit. For the last 3 years, this has been a slow motion car crash, and it never seems to have an end. Just when you think, okay, maybe a resolution has been found, then a new series of dramas, come about, and as a result, the nation, the British people have to deal with, a new, melodrama that is Brexit. I mean, in a nutshell, what's happened is that since 2016, when Britain first had the referendum, whether to stay or to leave the European Union, the British political establishment has been trying to work out how to leave the European Union, right? Yeah. And that's been extremely difficult because, of course, Britain has been a member of the EU since the early 70s. And Britain has established very intricate relationships, political and economic relationships, and also cultural relationships with this European Union. And so to remove yourself from that is a very complex process. and will ultimately damage Britain's economy if it does it in a way which is going to be a cliff-edge Brexit, right, or a no-deal Brexit. And so what they've been trying to do is they've been trying to work out how to leave the European Union in an orderly fashion. Now, of course, Theresa May tried to negotiate a deal with the EU, but she, on 3 separate occasions, unsuccessfully passed that deal through. Didn't manage to pass that deal through Parliament.
Well, she got the deal, didn't she? And she came back to Parliament, and they weren't happy with the deal, so she couldn't pass that deal, right?
Well, exactly. And the Brexiteers, they criticised the deal for being a Brexit light deal, and the Remainers in Parliament criticised the deal because it gave in too much, it compromised too much, and it didn't enable Britain to remain, in the European Union out of the European Union, but in a sizable way remain connected to the European Union.
Right.
So Theresa May failed, and of course Boris Johnson took over a few months back in order to try to resolve this problem. But he has been unstuck. He can't deal with the problem, and he is now in a very similar position to Theresa May. And as you said, he tried the tactic of proroguing Parliament, so that's the idea of suspending Parliament. Yeah. But he failed. But
Jalal, just before we get there, I mean, this guy seems to me, at least, as a layman, an observer, like a bull, just heading towards that, red flag, right, and just trying to, demolish anyone in his way. It seems like he's been derailed himself, because his character was, and his kind of, the way he came in is, move out the way, Theresa May. I'm gonna get this done, right? So I mean, now this. Exiting and the Brexit with a deal or without a deal come 31st of October, that's what he's trying to push through. Do you think, I mean, that's gonna happen, or and that was part and parcel of this proroguing the Parliament, was it not?
Well, that's right. Actually, when you call him a bull, I think you're on the money there. In the sense that he's come into office. And he's acted in a very bullish way, and he's managed to not only make enemies in the general public amongst the Remainer population, the 48% who voted for Remain, but also he's managed to achieve a lot of enmity within Parliament itself. So as you remember, a few weeks back, 21 members of his own party were suspended, removed from the party, and so now they sit in Parliament as independent members. So he's lost his majority. His majority is now minus 42 in Parliament, which means he can't effectively pass anything. The reason why he's presented himself as a bull is Boris Johnson knows that by the 31st of October, Brexit is impossible to achieve. And he knew that. He knew that from the beginning. Boris Johnson really has been aiming to win the next general election. And that's what all of his tactics, his strategy has been working towards. Right. He wants to win that general election, and he wants to win it on the back of the 52% who voted for Leave, right? So all of this stuff about he's negotiating with the European Union, and he's meeting with European negotiators, and he went to see Angela Merkel, and he went to see the Irish Taoiseach, and Leo Varadkar, and he attempted to hold meaningful negotiations. That's only for the optics. That's only for show. Yeah. Boris Johnson has no intention, and he knows actually in reality it's impossible for him to achieve any form of Brexit by the 31st of October. But that's not his intention. His intention, rather, is to convince the 52% that I'm trying to bat for your side. I'm trying to get through this Brexit. But the Parliament and the judiciary, the Supreme Court, and the pesky European Union, these institutions are preventing me from doing so. And so on the back of that, he wants to win a majority.
Right. So are you then saying that this 31st of October Brexit come with 31st of October and there's no deal, and he's committed himself to exiting the European Union without a deal, won't actually happen, and that's optics? Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's impossible to happen, and you're absolutely right, Sha'ban. The 31st of October deadline can't happen on the following basis, and that simply there is something called the Benn Act, right? So Hilary Benn, who is a Labour backbencher, he passed a bill for Parliament to prevent a legislation, a piece of law for Parliament, which mandates that if Boris Johnson doesn't come back with a deal from the European Union, Boris Johnson then has to go to the EU and seek an extension. That's now law. It is virtually impossible for Boris Johnson's government to break the law and to contradict this. So when he says do or die, I'd rather be in a ditch and all of that stuff, what he really is doing is he's playing to that gallery. He's playing to that audience. He's trying to win over the voter in Stoke-on-Trent, the voter in Blackpool, the voter in Nuneaton. These voters are traditionally working-class Labour voters. But actually, these voters feel that Jeremy Corbyn is a Remainer and he hasn't sufficiently backed their corner. So he's trying to win over the Stoke-on-Trent voter who may have voted Labour for the last 100 years, but these voters are pretty incensed that Brexit has not been achieved. And, if you look at any interview, when there are interviews of the ordinary Stoke-on-Trent voter, they are coming round to this. They like this rhetoric. They like it when he calls the Benn Act, a capitulation act, right? A surrender act. Because for them, that's the Churchillian spirit coming out in Boris. He's fighting for their corner. So it's nothing to do with the 31st of October. I mean, the 31st is a smokescreen. He actually needs to present himself as that leader who's standing up for the 52% so he can win that next general election.
And the next general election, I mean, at the moment, of course, no one's calling for a vote of confidence in Parliament, right? Because that will trigger off, I believe, the next general election. Jeremy Corbyn doesn't seem to have, many ideas of his own. I mean, is it confusion all the way around, or, in terms of from a Labour perspective, and or do they have a clear strategy when it comes to Brexit, whether it's remain or whether it's to exit?
Well, remember, so there's a couple of things there. Let me take the Labour point first, and if I may, I'll also talk about the next general election and how it possibly will play out.
We may have to do that after the commercial break, Jalal. We've got about a minute and a half before the commercial break.
Okay. Well, let's take the Labour point. Jeremy Corbyn is in immense trouble. Jeremy Corbyn, Labour Party, is dependent. If it is to come back to office, it really needs working class Brexit votes. So here's a statistic for you. The largest 10 seats that are Remain seats, the biggest 10 Remain seats are Labour seats. The biggest 10 Leave seats are Labour seats, right? And that is Labour's dilemma. In Stoke-on-Trent, which is a Labour safe seat, 75% of the population voted Brexit. It has the highest concentration of Leavers.
Right.
Jeremy Corbyn has to sit on the fence simply because if he doesn't sit on the fence, and that is in effect his policy, he would never return back to office because he's never going to be able to win over those Brexit supporting seats.
Right, Jalal, just hold on to that thought because we're going to immediately go into a commercial break, right? So I'm going to come back from the commercial break and we'll continue from this point and we'll continue. All right, I appreciate your patience. Listeners, we are about to go into a commercial break. I am with Muhammad Jalal. We are discussing Brexit. I'm hoping to put some clarity around this cloud of Brexit, and also what does it mean for me and you as Lutonians, right? Does it really impact me and you? We're going to be discussing that in a couple of minutes when we come back. Don't go away until then.
Assalamu alaikum, this is Atif Nawaz and you're listening to an Inspire FM podcast.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to Friday Night Live with me, Hafiz Sha'ban, on Inspire FM 105.1 FM. broadcasting to the good people of Luton and surrounding areas every Friday from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. and also broadcasting live to our sister stations nationally and internationally, also via the Inspire FM app, and of course live Facebook stream every Friday. Alright, so we have arrived at the last half an hour of the show. It's been a jam-packed show. We've been discussing Pakistan earthquake with a BBC correspondent out from Islamabad, out from Pakistan. We've also been covering the United Nations General Assembly and Imran Khan. Of course, Imran Khan's been very active over the last couple of days in New York, addressing a number of different dignitaries, leaders of other nations, addressing the issue of Kashmir and a number of other topics. We've been looking at that. We've been discussing what has been achieved and what can be achieved on the United Nations platform. We've also been discussing a new Anti-Islamophobia TV channel that is set to launch. Pakistan, Turkey, Malaysia coming together to address that. And of course, currently we are discussing the fiasco and the quagmire which is Brexit with an expert. At least he's an expert in comparison to mine and your understanding, possibly, Muhammad Jalal, who is a lecturer on UK politics in the UK. So we're going to go straight back to Muhammad Jalal, and we're going to be discussing, or we're going to be continuing to discuss it, Brexit. I'm going to ask, firstly, I'm going to appreciate Muhammad Jalal and his patience for the last couple of minutes whilst we were away on a commercial break. But I'm going to ask Muhammad Jalal to just bring us up to date. Give us, a perspective on where we are at the moment. Of course, the Parliament has reconvened after the Supreme Court judgment, right? So now we've got Parliament back on air. We've got the debate continuing. I don't think it is clarified and made anything clearer for the average, observer and listener and follower of the news. So why don't you just bring us quickly up to date, Jalal, in terms of where we are at the moment and what you see next, right? I mean, I know it's a very cloudy picture, right? And a lot of observers and commentators are giving a lot of commentary and what they feel is going to happen next, right? But bring our listeners up to date in terms of where we are at the moment, right? And what Brexit means for the average Lutonian, apart from the fact that when he's gonna decide to drive up to Dover next and take the ferry over to France, it may not be as easy as it used to be before the Brexit.
Well, I think it's probably important for your listeners to know that a no-deal Brexit is virtually impossible, because at the moment Parliament is just not going to allow it, right? Okay. And so what then needs to happen is a Brexit deal needs to be struck with the EU. Boris Johnson is unwilling to do that, and he shows for a pretense of negotiation, but actually I think that horse is already bolted. Okay. So Theresa May tried that, and that's impossible. So the only other option really available to government is to call another general election or to hold a referendum. Now, Boris Johnson is unwilling to call a general election, to hold a referendum, but he would like to call a general election. As you said previously, Hafiz Sha'ban, Jeremy Corbyn until now has resisted that, not because, Boris Johnson calls Corbyn a coward, and, he's suffering from cowardice because he hasn't called a... But that's not the reason. The reason is that if Jeremy Corbyn called a general election now, that could lead to Boris Johnson using a tactic to delay that election until after October and then pursuing a no-deal Brexit. And that's something that Corbyn doesn't want. So actually Corbyn has been slightly shrewd in not calling that general election now. But inevitably that election will be called, right? It will be after the 31st of October when a new extension has been given by the EU. Right. And then there will be a general election. Now, it's my view that probably before a general election, what you may end up having is a government of national unity. And so this is a government that crosses the House. So in effect, you would have a number of MPs within that government. Right. So you'd have Labour MPs, Conservatives, some ex-Conservative MPs, the 21 I mentioned previously, as well as Liberal Democrats and SNP. Now, if they can get the numbers, this government of national unity will become like a caretaker government, and that seems quite likely at the moment. In fact, just today, Nicola Sturgeon, who's the S&P leader, suggested that that's probably the best option at the moment. Tom Watson, who's the deputy leader of the Labour Party, has gone on record to say maybe a general election at the moment is not a good idea for Labour. So the only other option then for Labour is to have this national government, which will pursue a extension with the EU and very possibly call a referendum as a compromise. So I think a second referendum is not off the cards, Sha'ban.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay. That's interesting. I don't know if that's going to help or not, but there you go. All right. So lastly, just two quick questions for you, Jalal, before we have to unfortunately leave it there. What about the relevance for Muslims living in the UK? Right. So I mean, I was mentioning earlier, right, of the average Lutonian, why would he be interested in all of this fiasco called Brexit, apart from the fact that if he decides to drive over to Dover and cross over into France, there may be implications once a Brexit deal is negotiated and agreed?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I suppose, the general point is, with Muslims, we want to be aware of things. We want to be aware of the world around us. Right. We want to be aware of what's going on, right? We want to be politically aware. It's often the case that when we look around the society in which we live, many people just don't have much political information. They call it political literacy. And so as a result, they make very daft decisions in relation to politics. So we've got to be, shrewd and a bit more aware. And that accords, I think, with the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that talks about, a Muslim isn't bitten from the same place twice. That's all about awareness and being aware of issues.
Okay.
But maybe on a different level, Brexit has revealed, the weaknesses that currently pervade Western liberal democratic systems. And I would urge your listeners to read a really interesting book by a Financial Times journalist, Edward Luce, and the book is titled The Decline of Western Liberalism. And his argument, it's a very strong argument, his argument is that what we're seeing at the moment around the world, whether it's Trump or whether it's across Eastern Europe, or whether it's the new Brazilian leader or whoever it may be, or with Brexit, we're seeing a steady decline in this sort of liberal democracy that we were once told was on this linear path to we were on this linear path to a liberal nirvana. Do you remember Francis Fukuyama spoke about the end of history?
Yeah.
And I think that's a really interesting, a discussion to be involved in, and a very interesting discussion to be aware of. Where is this heading? In 10 years' time, we may be heading towards a situation where we have more populist leaders across the West who quite openly reject the tenets of liberal democracy that we believed until now were the only worthy ideals for a society to build their lives. So I think that's an interesting development, and and Muslims have to be aware of that and have to be have to follow the news and follow events so that we can become far more savvy about how we act and think.
Excellent. My producers are pushing me on to the next topic, but just before I go, I just really want to pick up about the new podcast that you've launched, The Thinking Muslim, Jalal. Tell me more about that. I mean, that's interesting because there are a lot of podcasts, that are available, and The Thinking Muslim, it was an interesting, title, a very, very catchy title. What led you to launch this new podcast, and what's different about it?
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity. So this podcast, the Thinking Muslim podcast, is an opportunity to explore topics, whether Islamic topics or topics to do with political events or general philosophical topics in a far more deeper way. So what I try to do is every week I try to get a guest who understands the topic very well, and I explore the topic inside out. I challenge the guest. So often it's not just an embracing of the guest's opinions, but I challenge the guest and try to get the guest to to account for their opinions. So just as a quick point, last week we had a really interesting brother from America who he's part of the Black Dawah network in America, and he works amongst impoverished black communities to carry Islam and an Islamic message to them, and he does it in a very innovative way by buying Malcolm X books and distributing them free of charge amongst these sort of very poor black communities. He came onto my show to talk about slavery in America, and he revealed that a good number of slaves who originally came over to America were Muslim slaves. They actually came from West African Muslim communities, and they were forcibly converted to Christianity in order to pacify them. So, you know, when he carries his da'wah, he explains this to the black community, but actually maybe your forefathers were Muslims who were forced to renounce their Islam. And it's a great listen, and you know I would advise your listeners to come on to the podcast. It's on all major podcast apps like Google and Apple.
Right. So I was going to ask next exactly how does one listen to your podcast then?
Well, so if you have an Apple phone, it will be through Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or Spotify, which is a popular app, and you can just download the podcast. Just type in the Thinking Muslim podcast, and you'll be able to see not just last week's show, but all of the previous shows.
Fantastic. Mohammed Jalal, I would have loved to slightly continue our conversation, but unfortunately producers are pushing me on to our other panelists that I've also got on there. So I need to go back to him. But Jazakallah khair, thank you very much for joining us and giving us your time on Friday Night Live. And hopefully we'll have you in the studio sometime in the future, near future, inshallah.
Yeah, that would be great. Jazakallah khair.
Jazakallah khair, Mohammed Jalal. Jazakallah khair. Okay, listeners, that was Mohammed Jalal from who is a lecturer in UK politics, trying to clarify and bring some clarity to this huge drama known as Brexit, and also giving us a quick introduction to his new podcast service which is being launched, The Thinking Muslim. Right, I have got my other panelist, my guest online. I believe who was Islamuddin. I'm gonna see if he's still online. Assalamu alaikum, Islamuddin.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Fantastic. Okay, because my system has gone into sleep mode, so I couldn't see whether you were actually still online or not. But Islamuddin Sajid, firstly let me apologize to you for making you wait for the last couple of minutes whilst I was trying to finish off with my former guest, and also apologize for we abruptly lost you earlier whilst we were having what I found was an interesting conversation with regards to Imran Khan and the last couple of days at the United Nations General Assembly. So we were discussing Imran Khan. Of course, Imran Khan has now been giving his speech on Kashmir. You've been following that, and you were giving me your perspective on things, before we lost you earlier. Why don't you just give me a quick summary of what your thoughts are on Imran Khan's stay at the United Nations in New York over the last couple of days, and what you feel he's been able to achieve?
Basically, Imran Khan today, he also several times just repeated has visit. The main purpose of his visit to the UNG, United Nations General Assembly, because the situation in Kashmir is very critical right now, because from the last 55 days, the whole valley is under siege. The Indian government has imposed round-the-clock curfew, and the people have no access even to the daily commodities and even to the hospital. Even the children couldn't go to the school. Definitely the situation is worsening day by day. So basically the visit of his purpose to just inform the world leader that where the situation is going. And secondly, Imran Khan and especially the Pakistani government, they are repeatedly show their fear that when the Indian government will lift the curfew, so definitely the Kashmiri people will come out on the street, they will protest against the Indian government actions. So the situation will go towards the clashes between the Kashmiri people and Indian security forces. So at that time, they feel that maybe there will be a massacre, there will be genocide, and then the Pakistan will definitely involve in the whole crisis. So if the Pakistan and India, they will go to the war this time. So this time, this war will not be just like a conventional war, because you know that on both sides, both countries are nuclear powers, and when the nuclear power will go to the war, so
yeah. So sorry, Islamuddin. So what, are you saying that? Sorry, just last comment with regards to the conflict, potential conflict between Pakistan and India. Is that what you're suggesting, that that if it's not resolved, peacefully through dialogue, then that's inevitable? Is that what you're trying to say?
Basically, Imran Khan and especially the Pakistani government, they want that the UN should
get involved,
come forward, because there are 11 UN resolutions over Kashmir, and they want that the UN should implement that resolution.
Absolutely, I hear that, Islamuddin, right? So I've also got Hassan Abdullah back, right, who's the diplomatic correspondent at TRT World. Fantastic to have you back, Brother Hassan. And also let me reach out to you and apologize to you because we lost you abruptly earlier. But now that you're back, Hassan, my question to you is, right, Pakistan, Imran Khan is reaching out. Trump has also, made a couple of comments of potential mediating, right? A mediating role. Do you really think that he's genuine with regards to trying to play this mediator role? And do you really think, or is it more just rhetoric with regards to achieving his own interests via Pakistan and Afghanistan?
Well, I think, first of all, there should be no doubt when it comes to personal interest, especially in the sort of current international system that we're looking at. When it comes to President Trump in particular, even in the United States, some people question whether he's putting the U.S. national interests first, or whether he's perhaps trying to promote some of his personal interests. But going back to this point Islamuddin Sajid had raised earlier, we have to understand that any country in this system has to take into account its economic interests. So India is a huge market. No country would want to, except for Pakistan probably, in this context, would want to have tense relations and have an effect on its market access in India. So we have to understand these points. It's a very complex system.
Yeah. I mean, precisely. All right. So with those economic interests in hand, that ultimately gives the leverage and puts more balls in the courts of India. So, I mean, almost irrespective of what Pakistan says and the complaints that Pakistan makes and the humanitarian violations and the, human rights violations and even the United Nations, policies that are being violated, quite frankly, who cares? Is the economic interests that are going to really speak the loudest. I think that's what we're saying. I'm not sure where.
Well, it depends on a number of factors.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry. There's this very strange noise. As if there's some sort of radio interference.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you can hear me clearly.
I can't.
But
okay.
There is something called the strategic calculus that all states have to take into account. So, for example, America has interest when it comes to market access in India. But at the same time, it has security interests associated with Pakistan. Now, obviously, the US is trying to diversify those security interests and not rely so much on Pakistan. So, for example, the US may want to increase its airlifting of supplies into Afghanistan as opposed to, let's say, taking the land route in Pakistan. So it's this complex calculus which all the states have to work out. So, for example, if you go into during the Cold War days, security was perhaps more important for the United States, at least in some parts of the world, than, let's say, direct market access at that time. So in the context of Afghanistan at that time, during the Soviet invasion, America did invest quite heavily in trying to contain communism there. So, this strategic calculus is something that we just simply cannot ignore.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so strategic calculus. I like the terminology, right? I want to get Islamuddin comment on this, right? You know, if I was to read between the lines of what Hassan is telling me, you know, it points more further towards my case, which is we'll do plenty of talking, but unfortunately there's not going to be much action with regards to resolving the Kashmir issue because of all of the, you know, strategic calculuses and the important calculuses that people need to make with regards to their own interests versus the interests of the nation that they're trying to reprimand or bring into line. So ultimately it means, Islamuddin, that we don't really get any particular solution, and Kashmir becomes another Palestine, and we'll be discussing it for a number of decades to come. Sorry, I think we're getting a lot of interference from your side, Islamuddin, by the sounds of it.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you now.
Yeah, so I was just talking about the UN Security Council. If the UN Security Council, if they want to resolve this issue, I think they could do it. But you know that from the last 50-55 days, we are just looking at the situation in Kashmir. And you just saw the last month, the UN Security Council, they gave it in New York. But even there was no statement they have issued after that meeting. So I think that if they want to just take some interest, then they could resolve. But if they will leave the issue on this, just like if they will have no show any kind of interest. So it's very, very difficult that only the Pakistan and India, because you know that Pakistan and India, it's very difficult that they will come on the
Okay, we're getting that interference again. But yeah, we've only got a couple of more minutes left. And last question that I've got for both Hassan and Islamuddin, right? I mean, let's move away from Kashmir. You know, there's been a lot happening in United Nations over the last week. What's been your highlight, right, for you? What are the particular points that you would raise, right? I mean, let's leave Kashmir to a side. I mean, let's take climate change as a subject. I mean, we've been discussing, and the nations have been coming together, and they've been discussing climate change for years, right? Without really being able to make much progress, and you know, even the decisions that have been made have been thrown out the window by the likes of Trump on a number of occasions. What have been your highlights of the week from the United Nations General Assembly, Hassan and Islamuddin? Let's go to Hassan first.
Well, you raised some very interesting questions there. First of all, I agree with the points you've just made there. And at the same time, I think some of the points you raised early in the program, we've briefly talked about this in the past as well. I think we need to go back to some basics. Right. Ultimately, for example, when it comes to many of the problems humans are facing, it boils down to our philosophical priorities. So, for example, the U.S. foreign policy is not exactly based on some ethical considerations. And that's true for this, dominant system at the moment in the world. But, for example, if you were talking, let's say, from an Islamic point of view, the priorities would be different. Humans would be given more importance than, let's say, some material interests of, a selected few people. But that's something, I understand you only have 2 minutes, so I'm just going to stop there. But perhaps it's worth you guys doing some show on it in detail.
No, fantastic. I mean, that's a very good perspective and a good way of summarizing it, Brother Hassan. I really appreciate it. Over to Islamuddin for your final comment, Islamuddin.
I think this time
Brother Islamuddin, unfortunately we can't hear you. A lot of interference, unfortunately. So I think we'll have to leave it there. I'm going to let the producers speak to you directly, and I'm going to ask the producers if they can also reach out to Brother Hassan Abdullah. Unfortunately, I just lost him whilst I tried to deal with technology. But listeners, we are coming towards the end of the show, and as I was saying earlier, it's great to be back in the hot seat. Friday Night Live, and mashallah, we've had a number of guests and great team effort by the producers and the management team at Friday Night Live for putting a fantastic lineup together. But we've been discussing General Assembly, United Nations. It would have been great to get more of a listener input. I mean, that would have been fantastic. I do always encourage our listeners to get involved. 01582 481822 07779481822. Don't be shy. Don't be afraid. I give my opinion sometimes. I try to keep a balanced view, but I give my opinion. Sometimes I can be pessimistic. Sometimes I can be optimistic. Sometimes I want you to be the same. I want to make this an interactive, lively show. Feel free to come online. Feel free to disagree, feel free to agree, but unfortunately you won't be able to do that this time because I've run out of time. Thank you very much for all our listeners. Thank you very much for all our guests. Thank you very much for the production team. This is Friday Night Live, and this is me, Hafiz Sha'ban, signing out. Until next week, inshallah ta'ala, when we'll be back with another number of topics that we're going to be bringing to you to discuss, inshallah ta'ala. So do join me next week when we'll continue with our debates, with our discussions on Friday Night Live. Until then, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. We stream our daily broadcast on inspirefm.org. You'll find all our daily updates on our social media at Inspire FM Luton.